We're always saying people are too young to be getting Botox. Well, what about teenagers? With us tonight is Dr. Sam Lamb. He's a triple board certified facial plastic surgeon, hair transplant surgeon who has published 5 major medical books and over 150 scientific articles on plastic surgery. He's featured in the New York Times after administering Botox to a 19-year-old man who wanted to narrow his jaw muscle. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sam.
Thank you, Kim.
So you don't think it's such a bad idea for teens to be getting Botox? I mean, many of us hearing this, we're thinking, what? I mean, like Jill was saying, anyone even in their 20s is too young to be receiving it, let alone teens.
Well, obviously it's not a short answer. The problem is that I don't think we could advocate, having Botox for teenagers just, carte blanche. I'm very, very discreet in the people that need it. I think you touched upon some of the points. I have actually my nurse's son came in, 13 years old, for major sweating, the point where he just literally couldn't be out there in public and had serious problems with that. I deal with a 22-year-old staff member that just has severe migraines. You pointed some of those things.
Right.
But in terms of cosmetics, a couple points. One is that, there's a lot of problems with lifestyle today, a lot of early wrinkling that's occurring from aggressive sun exposure, from tanning beds and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just bad habits of overexpression. So I'm not here to advocate, consistent usage. Just some of those early intervention can also make long-term benefits for these individuals. But again, very, very discreet.
Very discreet. So you don't think it's like the majority of teens or even half the teens? It's a very small number.
Absolutely. It's more the exception than the rule for me. And also, I always investigate the emotional side of things. I'm not here to just, be a technician and place Botox in. I've always explored to see if they're emotionally mature enough to desire it for the right reasons. Make sure, for example, I have many of them are models, people that have in the professional industry to look and enhance themselves to have an edge over other people. But I couldn't even remember the last teenager that came in just for cosmetic wrinkles.
Mm-hmm.
But the jaw slimming is something obviously that's a little bit more unique.
Yeah, explain that to me. I don't understand. How can you? I mean, I always thought Botox was pretty much for the like crow's feet and up. I didn't realize you could use it for the jaw.
Right. Yeah, this is something I learned in Asia. I read a book called Cosmetic Surgery of the Asian Face, and I learned it in Korea. So it's a very interesting technique. I've got people flying in from literally across the world for this technique because it's very hard to do accurately. Essentially what it is the masseter muscle, when you're biting down and chewing, gets enlarged either through just repeated motion or you're just born that way. There's a confluence of the 3 muscles just at the bottom portion where it attaches to the bone, and the theory behind this and is actually in practice is when you hit that point at the bottom portion where the 3 muscles come together, it not only shrinks the muscle bulk just by debulking it like you would, for wrinkles, because you're stopping the wrinkles in your forehead by stopping the muscle, but you're also, if you think about when you work out,
yeah,
you not only just build up muscle, but you build up bone because the muscle's attached to the bone. So when you shrink that muscle that's attached to the bone on the side, the bone actually shrinks as well over time. And so you do this about every 6 months for a few times, and you get pretty good longevity with the results.
Interesting.
Yes.
And is it mainly just Asians that have this problem?
No, it's actually, I would say it's pretty universal. I think in terms of the Asian subsets, the Korean population tends to have a sort of a congenital, that is, they're born with a large masseter muscle, and so that subset is more common. But I've done it, to be honest with you, probably 80% Caucasian, just because of the demographics in the United States.
Okay, so now this is the jaw, the part of the jaw that's like towards the back, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's the angle of the jawbone, like on the right. If you take your finger to the ear and move it down, it's just on the outer portion. It makes your face more oval and slender. And I've done it in men, too, surprisingly. I think there are a lot of men that are just interested in not having such a wide face. In fact, I'll be featured on the news program in a couple of days, and it's going to be a young Caucasian gentleman doing it.
Okay. So now if a teenager were to come into your office and say, well, I'm looking to get Botox, because I'm wrinkling, I mean, what would you look at or assess before you would agree to do it?
I think there's a lot of factors. I think one is emotional maturity. If they're coming in and they're perhaps really socially reclusive, and they just feel like they're overly they're just doing it to be with their social peers to look better. I think that's very hard to do because you need to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason, in the sense that if there's an industry professional reason to improve, but if there's nothing going on with their face and you're just putting Botox in, I don't really see a clear indication for that. And that's one of the things. That's why I rarely do it. I don't think there's much indication. But oftentimes, if they're early wrinkles, if they're in getting excessive sun exposure, obviously want to counsel them on that. But I think some early preventative Botox can help. I want to mention one point that I heard earlier in the segment when I was just listening in. You mentioned that what are the long-term effects of Botox?
Yeah.
Botox has been around since the 1970s. So people that say, I'm going to wait out to see if it's going to be safe, it's been around for that long a period of time.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with aggressive overusage in young age, that's not something I would advocate.
Mm-hmm.
But when you reach a certain age, maybe late 20s, early 30s, consistent usage is very, very effective. And I even moderate that. So even after many years, I'll look, and if it gets too, if it looks like the muscles are atrophying too much, I'll back off in certain areas.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. So, yeah, I know that my mom has been using Botox since the 80s, I want to say,
Yeah.
and she hasn't had any issues with it. So,
Right,
I
right.
think you're right there. We're pretty much as long-term as it's going to get with Botox.
Absolutely.
And also, as I'm listening to you talk about teens using Botox, I think that, especially if the teen is coming in for, like profuse sweating or migraines,
Right.
it's as doctors prescribe all kinds of other types of medications for all types of other ailments, and we don't have any problems giving our kids any other type of drug.
Right.
So administering Botox really isn't any different than giving our kids Vicodin, when when they're in pain, or cortisone shots if they have an injury or something.
I think like anything, as a medical professional, the first thing, you have to be ethical and you have to be responsible to the patient. So I think just, categorizing Botox as an evil for teenagers or as a positive for Botox for teenagers is too reductionist. When you look at that 12,000 study that you mentioned about by the ASAPs, you got to take a look and say, well, how many of those are for migraines? How many of those are for sweating versus wrinkles? They haven't discriminated that. So that's a big number to throw out there, and everyone just assumes it's for wrinkles, and that may not be the case.
Well, even then, if your teenager is already starting to wrinkle, that's awful for that teen. As they age, they're just going to feel more self-conscious. That could be a long-term effect for that, for that teen. And again, I do think that you're right. You have to use a lot of discrimination. You can't just say to the, every teen can't just go running to the doctor saying, well, now it's time for me to use Botox. That's just really ridiculous. But there are some extreme cases that perhaps maybe it would be useful for, and I could certainly see that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Dr. Sam Lamb, again, he's a facial plastic surgeon. Go to his website, lambfacialplastics.com. Coming up next, another cosmetic surgeon says, oh, no, there's no reason to give a kid Botox. We'll chat with her next. This is Your Time with Kim Iverson.